Thank you, Senator Scott. Senator Peters, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chollet, I certainly believe that a close working relationship and security cooperation between the United States and Israel is of the utmost importance to U.S. foreign policy. And in your previous role as Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security, you worked closely with your Israeli counterparts to expand security cooperation between our two countries. So my question for you, sir, is what did you learn from that experience? And if confirmed, what can we expect in your new role in terms of strengthening our defense ties with Israel?
Well, thank you, Senator Peters, very much for that question. You're indeed right. When I was the Assistant Secretary for ISA 10 years ago, I worked more closely with Israel than any other partner we had. I think I made about a dozen trips to Israel in the course of 3 years to that job and hosted Israeli friends here many times, and these are relationships that I have kept up ever since. I can tell you that the U.S.-Israel defense relationship right now is rock solid. It is based on an MOU that was negotiated several years ago to ensure that the U.S. is providing significant assistance to our Israeli partners. But the cooperation between the U.S. and Israel is a daily, hourly enterprise. And if confirmed, I would make it a high priority to continue to deepen that relationship and ensure that our Israeli friends have what they need to defend themselves by themselves.
Just to follow up then, Mr. Adlai, this Congress, I introduced, along with bipartisan support from Senator Fisher, the U.S.-Israel Future of Warfare Act, which would authorize $50 billion in joint research and development funds to enhance cooperation with Israel in areas of emerging technologies, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, quantum computing, and other technologies. So my question for you is, if confirmed, how would in your opinion, how would the Defense Department benefit from such a cooperation? And would you continue to support expanding our cooperation, particularly in these emerging technology fields?
Thanks, Senator Peters, for the question. Absolutely, I'll look forward to taking a closer look at your legislation. I can say that because of Israel's significant capabilities on the cutting edge of technology and warfare, that's one of the reasons why this partnership is so critical for us. And so if confirmed, I would seek to advance that cooperation because there's a lot that Israel learns from us, but there's also a lot that we learn from Israel.
Absolutely. Mr. Chollet, Israel's integration into the Middle East has certainly been broadened by the historic normalization agreements that we've seen with United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Morocco, Sudan, all of these known as the Abraham Accords, as you're well aware. By creating defense and military partnerships with our Gulf allies, Israel is enhancing opportunities for peace and integration while working together to counter some shared threats, including Iran's destabilizing activities throughout that region. My question for you is, if confirmed, what role do you see the U.S. military playing in strengthening and hopefully expanding the Abraham Accords?
Thanks, Senator Peters, for the question. In my view, the Abraham Accords were the most positive thing to happen in the Middle East in quite some time. And this administration and I personally have worked hard in the last few years to deepen the Abraham Accords, but also expand the network of countries in which Israel has normalized relations. It's unquestionably in our interest to see Israel have closer ties with her neighbors. It's a project I have worked on intensively in my role at the State Department. It's something I would certainly carry forward and make a priority in the Defense Department if confirmed.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Peters. Senator Tuberville, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks both of you being here today. Just one question on Ukraine, Mr. Chollet. If Vladimir Putin called you today and said, listen, if you'll just tell me that Ukraine will never be allowed in NATO, we'll move back to our 2021 borders, all fighting would stop, what would you say?
I'd say, President Putin, it's not your decision where Ukraine is going to be allied with.
Okay. What do you think was the biggest misstep in the Afghanistan withdrawal, in your thoughts, after looking at it?
Senator, I think there are so many lessons that we have to learn as a country by the 20-year engagement we had in Afghanistan. 2,400 troops lost, 20,000 injured, $2 trillion spent, It's why I applaud what Congress did with the support of this committee and the leadership of this committee to create the Afghan War Commission. And if confirmed, I pledge to you that I will do whatever I can to support the work of that commission, because it's critically important that we learn the lessons and apply the lessons of that 20-year engagement in Afghanistan.
So do you think we made some mistakes in the withdrawal?
I think, Senator, that there, of course, were mistakes made over that 20-year period. Absolutely.
I've seen some statements that you've made about our immigration and our border. 2 years ago, you can talk to pretty much any law enforcement officer in Alabama. They'd never heard of fentanyl, okay? We had less than 100 overdoses a year. Now fentanyl is #1 in our state, and we will lose over 1,000 people this year. What do we tell, the families that kids are dying because of fentanyl, that we won't do anything at the border? What do we tell them?
Senator, I really appreciate you asking this question, because shining a light on the scourge that is fentanyl and the damage it is doing in so many communities across this country is absolutely critical. I can say that the State Department, Secretary Blinken, has tried to make this into a global issue. Fentanyl is the #1 killer of Americans 18 to 49. And it's a problem that we cannot solve alone because of the elaborate supply chain that creates fentanyl that ends up in U.S. communities. So just last week in New York, Secretary Blinken hosted a meeting of foreign ministers to talk about ways that countries can work together to try to fight the scourge of fentanyl, because it's not just the U.S. alone that is facing this challenge. It's also synthetic opioids are ravaging the Middle East and Asia as well. So we have absolutely got to get at this problem. One of the things that I will do, if confirmed, at DOD is to understand DOD's role and see what more DOD can do to get at this problem.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like that we have everything in order from the DOD. When in May, our administration sent 1,500 troops to the border. In August, we pulled out 1,100, and a few days ago, we sent 800 back. If confirmed, I hope we get a little bit more consistency down there, because I don't know if you've been down there. It's a complete mess, and we need to save our kids. Let's get to my topic. You know what I've got. I've got a hold on admirals and generals through abortion. I'm pro-life. You will be part of solving this problem if confirmed, and it is a problem. I want to get this over with as much as anybody. How do we work this out?
Senator, thanks for the question. From where I sit,
I know you've thought about this. So
from where I sit, look, we need our team on the field. Given the challenges that we face in the world, from the pacing threat of China to the threat of Russia, we need all the team on the field. We can't fight with one hand behind our back, is my view. And the job I have been nominated for as a senior civilian at the Defense Department, I'm going to want my military teammates in their jobs as well. So it's my humble view that this issue gets resolved as soon as possible.
yeah, well, there's nobody more military up here than me, but I just hope we can work this out. The problem that I have, and I represent people in Alabama, and abortion is a very controversial subject, and it should be voted on by the people. My people in the state of Alabama won't say so about what happens to their tax dollars with abortion. And that's the situation that I'm in. I represent the people of my state, and hopefully we can work this out. But I just wanted to get your thoughts, because you'll be right in the thick of this as we go along, in the next few months. Hopefully it's not months. Hopefully it's just days. But thank you for being here. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Tuberville. Senator Kelly, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's important to point out and comment on what Senator Tuberville just said. I think the quote was, "There's nobody more military than me." As far as I could tell, there's at least 4 of us, maybe more, that served in the United States military, in some cases for decades, and at least 3 combat veterans. So I take great exception to what Senator Tuberville had to say, and I've heard him say it before, and it just doesn't make any sense. So I wish you would please reevaluate what you think your experience And, just be a little bit more careful about what you say about the United States
When you have
military.
a- when
And I'm
you've
very
had a
happy to
father-
defer to Senator
When you've had a
Tuberville.
father die on active duty, you've got a right to say whatever you want. Thank you very much.
No, I
for
don't,
your
I don't think
service.
that's the case. You have folks here that have served in the United States military, and I think in multiple branches. Mr. Chollet, just returned from a trip to Ukraine last week. This was my second this year, and I feel it's important to be on the ground to understand the issues we're facing. And they're significant. And the holds that Senator Tuberville has placed on our military is having an effect with our forces in Ukraine, and it's had an impact. But I want to talk about something else. And, that is the role commercial capabilities have had in Ukraine. And we've seen this with Starlink and others. And, I'm just a little surprised that we got this far and realized that because of a war in Europe that we had a gap in our own capability. And I think that's something we need to consider going forward. And I know there's been a little controversy about the Starlink services in Ukraine. I met with Gwen Shotwell from SpaceX yesterday. The details on this are a little bit complicated, and what's been publicly reported is just not accurate. So looking forward here, it's critical that DoD structures some of its contracts with commercial providers. I'm not specifically talking about SpaceX, to ensure that services that our troops and allies depend upon will be there when they need them. So, Mr. Chollet, I'd like to continue the discussion we had in my office a couple weeks back. If confirmed, what will your approach be to ensuring that future commercial contracts, regardless of the provider and across the department, have the provisions necessary to ensure their services will be there when they need them?
Senator Kelly, thank you for the question, and thank you for the time the other week in your office, and thank you for going a second time to Ukraine. It's very, very important that members of Congress go regularly to Ukraine to see for yourselves what's going on and assess the situation and what we need to do differently. This is an issue that I will be engaged in if confirmed, because Ukraine has been an incubator in many ways of defense innovation, just given the way the Ukrainians have been utilizing the private sector as well as what the United States and others have been providing them. So if confirmed, I would work closely with my colleagues in the acquisition space to see that we're doing what we can to ensure that we're innovating as best we can when it comes to working with the private sector and in getting Ukraine and anyone else the systems that they need to protect themselves.
And Ms. Abercrombie, do you intend, when you're confirmed here, intend to review existing contracts that the department has with our commercial providers to ensure that they meet DoD requirements?
Senator, if confirmed, I think it's absolutely essential that I take a look to make sure, number one, we've baked in an understanding with commercial providers from the outset what the DoD requirements are, so that we don't have surprises down the road and we have what we need. And certainly, Senator would commit to making sure we're retroactively looking to ensure we have all the capability we need when we need it.
And Mr. Chollet, do you have any additional concerns about how our adversaries might weaponize commercial services that are available, and what we could possibly do to prevent that?
Well, Senator, thanks for the question. I do have concerns looking at it from the outside because it does seem to be an area of vulnerability. If confirmed, it's something I'll look into from the inside and fully understand the scope of the vulnerability and what we can do to get at that.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Kelly. Senator Mullen, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Kelly, you may want to clarify those statements, because a family member serves alongside the service member too, especially a Gold Star family. And if you don't believe that, then go talk to the Gold Star families themselves, because Mr. Tuberville is part of that Gold Star family. And you know, comment there,
Senator,
but I'm just
Senator, I appreciate.
No, I'm not yelling time. I'm just saying you may want to clarify that statement.
Well, I can
because they do
clarify it right
serve.
now.
I know, but it's my time. Mr. Chollet, you have made several comments talking about the Biden administration's withdrawal and the success of it. Obviously, I have some serious concerns about that. First of all, has anybody been held accountable for the disastrous withdrawal that took place, considering the American lives that were lost and how many Americans we left behind?
Senator Mullen, thank you for the question, and thank you for the time in your office the other week, and I genuinely...
I'm short on time. I just didn't know, has anybody been held accountable?
Senator, accountability is critically important.
No, I'm just saying, has anybody been held accountable? That's a simple one. It's a yes or it's a no.
Senator, we have tried to learn the lessons from
Has
that.
anybody been held accountable?
Senator, we've tried to learn the lessons from that withdrawal and apply those lessons today.
So that's a no. Just, is that a no? No one's been held accountable?
We have tried to learn those lessons.
So no one's been held accountable?
We've tried to learn those
Okay,
lessons.
so, well, it's not hard to really learn lessons, especially when you do a good debrief. In fact, when I talked to you about it in my office, you said, well, the chips need to lie where they may. That was your comments when I was talking to you about the accountability. Because if we don't learn lessons, then we're definitely determined to make those same mistakes again. Several times, Secretary Blinken and this administration lied when they said that every American that wanted out got out. Do you believe those statements were accurate?
Senator, I do.
Oh, you do? Well, then why was there hundreds of Americans that got out? And by the way, the night of the 29th, 28th, and the 30th, I was assisting trying to get those Americans out when you guys said that every American that wanted out could get out. But the truth is, the Abbey Gate, after the bombing, HKI was closed, and you know this as a fact. No one was getting into HKIA. They were getting turned away. In fact, the morning of the 30th, and this is recorded on your hotline that you set up for Afghanistan, I was asked, because I had a 3-year-old girl, plus I had Miriam and her 3 children, plus a whole host of other people that we were trying to get in. And all night of the 29th, you guys were taking me from gate to gate to gate to gate to gate to gate to gate, trying to get these individuals in HKIA. And all that had to be said was that you guys had to call over the gate and ask for them because we were dealing with the Taliban. And see, the Taliban, ironically enough, if we paid them enough money, we could get Americans out. But the State Department was stopping us every step of the way. And so the morning of the 30th, your employee at the State Department asked me personally, do you have another way to get them out? Because we've closed the airport. And so for you to sit there and say that every American wanted to get out, you're absolutely lying. And you know that to be factual, and you say it with a straight face. What's bad is that 3-year-old girl we're trying to get out died a few days later from a leg infection, and you all knew about it because I sent you pictures of it that's still on my phone, was why I said it was important that we got her out through HKIA because she needed serious medical attention. By the way, this wasn't a refugee. This was an American citizen, and her parents were American citizens, and you all knew this to be factual. And then when we drive her across the country and we get her to the border to Tajikistan, your ambassador, Ambassador Promagine, which this is also recorded, told me personally, I was told by Washington, D.C. not to assist you in any way. Who told him that?
Senator, thanks for the question. And
No, I don't want to know who told him that. I don't have much time. I don't want you to try to get around it. Who told him that?
Senator, I don't know the details of that.
Well, the State Department said it. Has he been held accountable? Because that 3-year-old died because of her leg infection before we get her across the border.
Senator, again, I appreciate what you did to help.
No, I don't want that.
Others.
I don't need that. I don't need that. I want accountability. I want someone to be held accountable. Because you know what happened after that 3-year-old girl died, and I called you guys and I said that she died? I hung up the phone and we went black as a team and we quit communicating with you. And 3 days later, you guys, the State Department, released my photo and my approximate location to the Washington Post and said I was lost in Afghanistan with a bag of cash, and never called my family to see if that was true. Never called my wife. You guys released it to a political rag, and they ran it, and they put my life in serious danger, including the entire team that was trying to get the Americans out that you guys left behind. And not one single person has been held accountable. And then when Miriam and her 3 kids from Arlington, or from Amarillo, Texas, when we finally got them out across the border of Tajikistan, without your all's help, because you guys refused to help us because you told the ambassador not to assist us anyway, Secretary Blinken, the person you was advising, goes to the podium and says, the State Department has successfully negotiated to get the first Americans out since the fall of Afghanistan. I didn't know you guys were there when she had a gun held to her hand with her 2-year-old in her arms. And she started puking because she was so scared. I didn't know you guys were helping that. I didn't know you guys were making a single phone call. I didn't know you guys were there paying off the Taliban with that bag of cash that you said I had in the hands. I didn't know you guys were there. And you're going to tell me that you can't say if someone's been held accountable or not?
Senator Mullen, your time's expired.
There's a problem here. And there's zero chance I support you moving forward.
Let me now recognize Senator King.
We're the Senate Armed Services Committee. It's not you guys and us guys. We're Americans. We're Americans. This committee, we're all Americans. We might have different political parties and different political views. Criticism is an American right, and we ought to be critical when we need to be, and we can have different views about what criticisms are fair or not, but it's not you guys and us guys in this room. We're all Americans trying to serve the public, and I hope we will act that way. I do think the discussion, about lessons learned from Afghanistan can't just be punted to a commission that's going to come back with answers later, because we've spent a lot of time around this committee table and we have views. I'm not an expert. For those who want to read the report that has been provided by state to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, members who aren't on the committee probably didn't know that report had been provided. I think you're entitled to it. So you should just ask to see that report. And if any of you have a challenge getting it, Senator Shaheen and I and Senator Rounds are on the Foreign Relations Committee. Come to us and we'll go to bat for you. A lot of reports are out there that we can see, but you never know that it's been given to another committee. Well, now we do know that's been provided to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and if folks want to read it, ask to see it, and if you have trouble, come to the SFRC members, and we'll work to make sure that you see it. The mistakes that seem the most obvious ones to me, and yet we need to dig into it even further. The mistakes that seem most obvious is, one, President Trump should never have negotiated a peace deal with the Taliban and cut out the Afghan government. It basically threw them under the bus. It committed to a deal that they had no ownership in, that they found to be unacceptable, and that caused a huge loss of Afghan morale for the U.S. to negotiate a withdrawal with the Taliban without including the Afghan government. Who thought that was a good idea? Who came up with that idea of not inviting the Afghan government to participate in the withdrawal agreement? And then the second agreement that goes more on the Biden administration's shoulders is there were a variety of scenarios presented to the administration about the Afghan military's capacity and how strong they would be. And some were really pessimistic, some were kind of middle of the road, and some were quite optimistic. And what we heard from the DOD and administration witnesses who came before us were the optimistic ones, that the Afghan military would be very strong. And we now know that the administration was being given pessimistic estimates as well. And when you get a range of estimates, you shouldn't just accept the rosy one. And I think that was clearly a mistake. Now, even with those mistakes, if there had been a proposal before this committee or before Congress to do what would have had to be done to stay longer, put more American troops in, I can't imagine that would have gotten support on either side of the aisle in this committee, in Congress, either house. That would have been necessary to stay longer. But the rosy scenarios about what the Afghan military would do probably led to some mistakes at the end. I mean, we should have planned on a worst case scenario, not on a rosy case scenario. And I think that was a mistake. And I think we got to own it, because people who are watching at home, they don't want to just see, well, we'll have a commission that will come back and give us some recommendations down the road. So anyway, to my committee members, if you want to see the report that has been given to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, ask for it. And if you have trouble getting it, ask me and I'll try to help. Ms. Abercrombie, we talked a lot about some of the things you'd focus on if confirmed. Can you expand on, for my colleagues, some of the acquisition strategy you talked about, error reduction, incentive structures for the contracting process? Can you share some of those ideas?
Thank you, Senator, for the question, and thanks for the time in your office the other week. So, Senator, if confirmed, I think I've got a few priorities, and that would be certainly making sure we get equipment at speed and scale to the warfighter, and so that does look to reduce timelines, both by ensuring we're using the flexible acquisition authorities that have been provided by Congress and the new acquisition pathways that have been implemented by DoD. It's making sure we're training the workforce properly to apply all those and make sure that it is being applied across the department, sharing lessons learned, and also reducing the barriers to the non-traditional suppliers, making sure we have competition in the marketplace, so to speak, attracting smaller businesses, traditionally disadvantaged businesses, et cetera, potentially by reducing regulatory barriers and making sure those pathways are clear.
I look forward to working with you on those and supporting both your nominations.
Thanks.
Thank you, Senator Kane. Senator Budd, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, both of you all, thank you for being here. Congrats on your nominations. Mr. Chollet, I'd like to do a bit of a quick round, if you would, on a range of topics. So if you would keep your answers rather short. Assistant Secretary Wallander and General Cavoli, they're on the record stating that 2% of GDP is no longer sufficient spending goal for NATO. Do you agree?
Senator, thank you for the question. Thanks for the time in your office the other day. I do agree. The new NATO agreement at the Vilnius summit is that 2% is the floor, not the ceiling for defense spending for our NATO allies.
Thank you. So one of the criticisms of ongoing support to Ukraine is a potential trade-off of munitions that we're sending compared to what Taiwan requires to defend itself from an increasingly aggressive China. So if confirmed, do you commit to reviewing this and providing your best policy advice to as Secretary, as well as to Congress?
Yes, Senator, absolutely.
If you determine that such trade-offs exist, do you commit to working with your colleagues, particularly the Undersecretary for Acquisitions and Sustainment, to request both the resources and authorities necessary to meet our defense requirements and commitments, including maximizing existing production lines and/or increasing production lines of critical munitions?
Yes, Senator, absolutely.
So in the fiscal year 2017 NDAA, Congress included Section 922 to enhance or upgrade the Assistant Secretary of Defense for special operations and low-intensity conflict. It upgraded their responsibilities to be more like those of a service secretary. So if confirmed, do you commit to take actions necessary to fully implement Section 922? Yes or no?
Yes, Senator, I look forward to, if confirmed, working to implement that and working with you on that.
Thank you. Mr. Chollet, on a different topic, you're on record stating that, and I quote, and my colleagues mentioned similar things a few moments ago, but I quote, you said it was preposterous and not supported by evidence that there is a security threat along the southwest border. But we know now that that's objectively false. So earlier this week, Customs and Border Protection stated that there were approximately 11,000 encounters at the southwest border in a 24-hour span, making it the single highest day in recent memory. So as of July, 160 migrants who matched those listed on the terrorist watch list have been apprehended crossing the U.S.-Mexico border during 2023 compared to 100 in all of 2022. That's just the ones we know about. So would you still say that there is no security threat along the southern border?
Senator, we need to have a safe and secure border. DOD,
You say that there is no security threat along the southwest border, sir?
I believe there are security threats across the southwest border, which is why we need a safe and secure border.
But at one
Yes.
point you said it's preposterous and not supported by evidence that there's a security threat, so you don't agree with your prior statement.
Senator, I don't recall the specific example or that quote or what the security threat in question I was being asked. But what I can tell you is, if confirmed, I believe we need to have a safe and secure border, and if confirmed, I'll work to ensure the DOD is playing
Thank you.
its
And you believe
role
that there is a security threat along the southwest border as of now?
I believe that Secretary Austin was absolutely correct to add additional DoD resources.
Sir, I'm just asking you, would you believe that there is no security threat along the southwest border as of right now?
I believe that there is a threat that warrants the deployment of U.S. active duty troops to the border, which Secretary Austin has done.
Let me broaden the aperture a bit. So it's a basic matter of sovereignty for nations to secure their border. Do you agree?
Absolutely.
I understand that you would prefer not to send troops to the border so that we can maintain readiness to respond to the military threats posed by China, Russia, and other bad actors. But until the Biden administration prioritizes border security, I believe it's a necessity, do you not believe, to secure our southern border?
Senator, thanks for the question. I believe we need to have a safe and secure border, full stop.
Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you very much, Senator Budd. Senator Duckworth, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to our witnesses. I want to take this opportunity to reinforce the importance of our support for Ukraine. I attended a very important briefing on Ukraine with members of this committee yesterday, and I believe that it's vital that the United States continue to support the Ukrainian people against unprovoked Russian aggression. And I urge my colleagues to consider how important assistance to Ukraine is to our national security. Putin and the rest of the world are watching our actions, and any failure of this Congress to continue appropriating funds to support Ukraine's defenses will have consequences throughout the world, including right here at home. And if we fail to support Ukraine, Putin will learn the lesson that he can do whatever he wants. Others will learn that same lesson as well. That makes the world a less safe place, a less free place, and that impacts our economy and our national security. Our allies are providing immense support to Ukraine right now, but they are watching what we do closely. If we retreat early, we are jeopardizing the war effort and playing into Putin's hands. Ms. Abercrombie, if confirmed, your position would be responsible for working with other interagency partners to deliver vital defense capabilities to Ukraine. And Mr. Chollet, you would become the lead architect of DoD policy if confirmed. Can both of you speak to the importance of our assistance to Ukraine's war effort, as well as to United States national security?
Senator Duckworth, thank you for that important question. I think, as President Biden has said, we will support Ukraine for as long as it takes. And then from the Defense Department perspective, that certainly includes contracting and getting the equipment to Ukraine. So if confirmed, I would work very closely with interagency partners and across the department, importantly, to make sure, as Congress has appropriated the dollars, we are getting things on contract as quickly as possible.
Thank you.
And Senator Duckworth, thank you for the question. Thanks for the time in your office a few weeks ago. Fully agree with my colleague here and fully agree with the thrust of your statement on the importance of Ukraine winning. It's a very simple proposition from my perspective. If Russia were to stop fighting, the war would end. If Ukraine were to stop fighting, Ukraine would end. And I think it is in our national security interest to continue to provide significant support to Ukraine.
Thank you. Earlier this year, I introduced a Southeast Asia Partnership Expansion Act and secured its inclusion into the Senate version of FY24 NDAA. My bill expands a military cybersecurity partnership with Southeast Asian partners that I created in 2020. Based on the success of that program in Thailand, Indonesia, and Vietnam for cybersecurity training and partnership with the United States, I'm now seeking to include the Philippines and Malaysia into the program. Additionally, I recently led a CODEL to Indonesia, Thailand, and the Philippines to strengthen ties and reinforce support between Southeast Asia and the United States. During my trip, I spoke with U.S. service members advising partner militaries in the region and heard that there is a huge demand for additional training that could increase interoperability, like English language training. In fact, they mentioned the fact that they've had some of their candidates return from the U.S. military academy because they failed the English language test 3 times. And this was a very capable officer and yet could not pass the English language test. Mr. Chollet, how important are programs like English language training and basic cybersecurity training for interoperability? And what other ideas do you have to build our interoperability in the region?
Well, thank you, Senator Duckworth, and thanks for your championing the importance of Southeast Asia. As we've discussed many times, it's been a priority for the Biden administration. It's been a priority for me personally. In the last 2.5 years at the State Department, I've done around 8 trips to Southeast Asia because I believe those partners are critically important to our national security and our posture in the Indo-Pacific. I think we've made some very, very important strides in deepening those relationships, but I think there is much further to go, and I would, if confirmed, would look forward to work with you closely on some of the innovative ideas you and others have had on a way we can deepen those partnerships.
Thank you. So if confirmed, will you work with me to help secure funding, authorities, and resources for some of these ideas in future years?
Absolutely, Senator. I'd like to work with you on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, because I want to ensure that we are prioritizing and adequately resourcing programs that can build on these ties in Southeast Asia. If confirmed, Mr. Chollet, how do you plan on using your diplomatic experience gained during your time at the State Department to shape the DoD's policy on building relationships with partners in the Indo-Pacific region, specifically Southeast Asia?
Well, thank you, Senator Duckworth, for the question. As I said earlier, I believe that what I call defense diplomacy is a critical part of the job of Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, and if confirmed, I would seek to pursue that and work with my colleagues as well who are doing that. These relationships and partnerships are critically important to our security. They're a force multiplier for us. They are part of our enduring advantage, and they're at the heart of our national defense strategy. So whatever we can do to make those alliances and partnerships stronger is something that I'm going to set out to do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Duckworth. Senator Schmidt, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chollet, what did you mean when you told the New York Times that the Army in particular is a pretty Bubba-oriented system?
Thanks, Senator Schmidt, for the question. I really appreciate it. As I mentioned earlier, I was referring to the importance of mentorship and leadership. It was sort of a colloquial way to say that mentors and leaders really matter.
Well, you could have said that, but you didn't. The Merriam-Webster defines it as very simply as redneck and offers that the term is, quote, informal and often disparaging. It also cites the word's origin as a, quote, stereotypical nickname of Southern white males. You understand how that might be offensive?
I do, Senator, and that was certainly not my intent in using
Right. And you're asking to be promoted to the number 3 position at the Department of Defense. There are recruitment challenges. I'm sure that there are Southern white males who might like to join the military. Do you think this is helpful in that recruitment effort?
Senator, I think the most important thing we can do to have good recruitment is ensuring that we have good, strong leadership, which was the point I was trying to make.
Right. Do you think lobbing a slur their way is helpful with that?
As I said, Senator, that was certainly not my intent.
Okay. In your book, The Middle Way, you said that you noted that systemic racism has been a problem in this mostly white and male establishment for a long time, referring to the foreign policy establishment. Do you believe that the State Department is systemically racist?
Senator, I do not.
Do you believe that the Department of Defense is systemically racist?
Senator, I do not.
Do you believe that our armed services are systemically racist?
Absolutely not.
Okay. I want to turn your attention to another topic. You're familiar with the department's Global Engagement Center?
The Department of State's Global Engagement, yes,
Right.
I am.
Yeah. And working with the Election Integrity Project?
Only vaguely familiar with that, Senator.
Okay. Well, it happens to be that in the Missouri versus Biden lawsuit that I happen to know something about as Missouri's Attorney General, the State Department was specifically part of this in their effort to censor Americans. And Judge Doherty, in his order, when he issued the injunction, noted that the Election Integrity Project, all 21 of the repeat spreaders of so-called disinformation were conservative or right-wing political, had conservative or right-wing political views and supported President Trump. Of those 21 included President Trump, Eric Trump, Breitbart News, and Sean Hannity. I want to ask you, do you think that the government should be telling Americans what they can see or what they can hear or what they can say?
Senator, thanks for the question. What I can say is I know the work of the Global Engagement Center at the Department of State is critically important as we seek to fight disinformation, misinformation around the world. I do not know the specifics of this instance, so I'd be happy to take this back and get back to you on a more fulsome answer.
Okay, so how would you combat, what would you say is the best way to combat information that you deem to be not accurate? What would be the way to do that?
Well, when it comes to foreign source misinformation, I mean, exposing
let's talk about political viewpoints of Americans, because that's really what this case is about. What is the best way to do that?
Senator, again, I'm not familiar with this case
No,
specifically.
I'm just asking your opinion. If there was an American, let's say the President of the United States, or a news outlet, or somebody, a resident of the state of Missouri had a viewpoint that you thought was inaccurate, what is the best way for you as a government actor to deal with that?
Senator, it's not something I'm particularly qualified to opine on, but I would say that.
Well, you were a senior member of the State Department when they actively engaged in censorship, according to the judge.
As I said, Senator, I'm not familiar with this case, so I'd be happy to take this back and get back to you on a more fulsome answer.
Do you believe that the government should collude with big tech companies to censor speech?
Senator, I do not.
And you're aware that that was actually the finding of the court, right?
As I said, I'm not familiar with this case.
Okay. Well, I'm informing you, and I'll be happy to follow up, but the judge's ruling found that the State Department, through this election integrity initiative, was censoring Americans, threatening legal action if they didn't censor Americans, threatening antitrust investigations if they didn't censor Americans. I find that this activity that isn't talked about a lot up here is, could be devastating to the fundamental right of free speech in this country. And the fact that people have the right to speak their minds, even if you don't agree with it, even if you think it's inaccurate, the best way to deal with that is more information. So I would encourage, as you go back to the State Department or whoever you talk to, that's legit. But working to censor America, the government has zero business telling Americans what they can say, what they can hear, what they can think. And they also can't outsource that censorship to big tech giants, which is exactly what happened here. And I'm troubled by the fact that you were center stage in this. Your comments that we talked about aside, the State Department was actively working with big tech giants to shut down American speech. And so, you know, your testimony here doesn't give me any greater comfort as you're seeking a promotion. It's with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Senator Schmidt. Senator Sullivan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to our nominees, thank you, and thank your families for service. Kids are doing well there, Mr. Chollet, so it's a long hearing. I appreciated our meeting the other day. Let me ask you directly the question that I asked. What's the #1 goal for the Department of Defense?
Senator, thank you very much, and I very much appreciate the meeting the other day and the conversation we had on a whole range of issues. The #1 goal of the Department of Defense is to make sure that we have a force that is lethal, that is precise, and that establishes robust deterrence. And we want our adversaries
And to win wars if our
absolutely.
troops are called on. To win wars. Right?
Absolutely, Senator.
So here's a big issue, and you just saw the frustration from Senator Schmidt, and I'm going to talk about it. I think our civilian leadership at the Pentagon, a lot of them, particularly your predecessor, pushed an agenda that had a lot, that in many ways had nothing to do with that. You and I talked about this yesterday, and look, it was a very legitimate line of questioning. Sadly, because 3 years ago, your predecessor was here in this confirmation hearing, the undersecretary for policy, who my view was a political hack. And one of his opening statements said his goal was to, quote, stamp out systemic racism within the ranks of the military. I said, wow, that's a pretty damning question to the ranks of the military. You ever served in the military, Mr. Secretary, Mr. Professor? No, Senator. Do you have any data backing that up, that we have systemic racism within the ranks of the military? No, Senator. So let's just be, I want to get this directly. Do you think that the U.S. military, one of the most admirable civil rights organizations in U.S. history, has systemic racism within the ranks, and do we need to stamp that out as your predecessor said in his confirmation hearing? Do you agree with him?
Senator, as we discussed yesterday in your office, I don't believe that.
Okay, that was an insult to our troops, and the guy went on to be the #3 guy in the Pentagon. Do you want to apologize, perhaps, for that, even though you didn't say it? Do you understand why that's just insulting to the men and women who serve in the military? You understand? You understand why Senator Schmidt gets upset about this? I get upset about it. I was really mad at the previous undersecretary.
Senator, I fully understand.
You think, would you want to apologize on his behalf?
Senator, it wasn't my statement to make. I can just
Okay,
tell you
it
my
wasn't.
views.
Okay. Well, look, it's good that if you're confirmed that we have an undersecretary actually respects the troops, doesn't disparage them, without any data. Call was supposed to come back to me with his data. He never did, never had it. Let me ask another agenda that's being pushed. Do you believe the Secretary of the Navy got his climate change action plan to this committee 18 months ago, got his warfighting shipbuilding plan the night of his posture hearing 2 months ago? What's more important, warfighting and shipbuilding for the U.S. Navy or their climate action plan?
Senator, I would say,
Just answer it directly. It's an easy question. You should just give me the right answer.
I would say they're both important, but what's the most important is getting you responses in a timely fashion.
Well,
which
no,
I
I'm
commit to
talking
doing.
about building ships and warfighting or some, nebulous climate plan for the U.S. Navy. What's more important for the U.S. Navy? Come on, this is not a hard question. Just,
We need to have.
I know your minders are watching and everything, but this is what we need you to do, is be strong. When you get the woke part of the military trying to shove all this stuff down the throats of the Pentagon, it's warfighting and shipbuilding for the Secretary of the Navy, isn't it? Isn't that more of a priority than climate change?
Warfighting is absolutely critical, and having a capable Navy is absolutely critical. If confirmed, I will do whatever I can to
And more important than climate change?
I think climate change is absolutely critical as well. The National Defense
They're
Strategy.
equally important? Come on.
They are
This
both.
is not hard, right? And this is why I worry about Biden administration officials who are civilian nominees coming in. This is an easy question. Of course it's warfighting and shipbuilding. Just answer it.
Senator, again, as I said to you in your office, I think we need to be getting you these responses in a timely fashion. That's the bottom line for me, whether it's about climate change or the Navy or the Air Force or anything else.
So this exchange is very disappointing, because part of the biggest concern that so many of us have is the civilians at the Pentagon are shoving down a system of values that don't relate to war fighting, don't relate to lethality. Let me give you another question. This president has put forward a budget 3 years in a row that shrinks the Army, shrinks the Navy, shrinks the Marine Corps, shrinks the budget each year. The president's put forward inflation-adjusted cuts. And next year, the Biden budget will take us below 3% of GDP for military spending. I looked it up. That'll only be the fourth time in 70 years. And yet everybody comes before this committee and says it's the most dangerous period since World War II. And the president continually puts forward budgets to cut defense spending. We'll be below 3% next year. I think the fifth time in 70 years. What's your sense on where the budget should be? Do you agree with the President of the United States that we should be cutting the budget? That's where he has put forward his budget. And the current budget shrinks the Army, shrinks the Navy, shrinks the Marine Corps. Is that the signal we want to send to Xi Jinping and Putin?
Senator, I believe we need to have a robust defense budget. If confirmed, I'm going to work to see the Defense Department get as much resources as it can. I of course, support the administration's budget submission to you, but if confirmed, would look forward to working with Congress to see whatever we can do to get the warfighter what they need.
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple additional questions, if I may, if there's no one else here. Second round. This is a really important position, and
I would ask, Senator, to just direct your questions and do so as succinctly as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yesterday, I brought to the Senate floor my bill to pay our military. If there's a government shutdown, this bill would say, hey, even if there's a government shutdown, we're going to pay the men and women of the U.S. military, because they're not going to get a day off even if there's a government shutdown. Do you support that bill?
Senator,
to pay our troops if there's a government shutdown?
I don't know the specifics of that bill, but absolutely we need to ensure that our national security needs are being taken care of, and hopefully we can do that by avoiding a shutdown.
Yeah, I agree. I hope we avoid a shutdown too. On Ukraine, you and I talked about this. I've been a supporter of Ukraine. You said if aid was cut off, it would be devastating. I've been supporting Ukraine aid. However, there's been a pattern within this administration, and a lot of it was the blame was pinned on your predecessor, is that almost every weapon systems, it's a long list, HIMARS, Stingers, Javelins, Patriots, F-16s, tanks. The administration has said, we're not sure we're going to do that. There's this self-deterrence. You know, Undersecretary Call would say, well, that might make Putin mad. And then we, this committee in particular, Democrats and Republicans, pressure, 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 and you finally relent. Now that is really hurting the war effort, and it frustrates people. I think it undermines certain members' support for Ukraine. If confirmed, can you commit to actually accelerate the ability to get the Ukrainians weapon systems and not delay it for 9, 10, 11 months, get pressure from the Congress, and then finally do it?
Senator, thanks for the question. As we discussed in your office, if confirmed, I will move heaven and earth to get the Ukrainians what they need when they need it. We need to think about what they can operate, what they can maintain, and what would be most effective in the fight. We need Ukraine to win, so I would see it as one of my top priorities to ensure that we're getting Ukraine what it needs.
Let me ask just a few more quick questions, and maybe we'll just get commitments for you on the record. I care a lot about the Arctic. America has strong strategic interests in the Arctic. You may have seen in August, Chinese and Russians sent a joint naval patrol of 11 warships off the coast of my state, Alaska. We're an Arctic nation because of Alaska. The Pentagon, in my view, has been the last agency in D.C. to understand the strategic interests of the Arctic. This committee has pressed the Pentagon for almost a decade to focus on it more. Can you give me your views on the strategic imperative and interest we have as an Arctic nation in the Arctic?
Absolutely, Senator, and thank you for focusing so much on this issue. It's an issue that I've worked on quite a bit in the last year at the Pentagon, or sorry, at the State Department, and if I confirmed to go to the Pentagon, I would carry that forward. My understanding is the Defense Department is working on a new Arctic strategy, which is going to nest under the National Strategy for the Arctic that was released last year. Arctic is critically important to us, and we've seen Russia, but then of course the PRC is doing more and more in the Arctic, and I would urge my colleagues at the Defense Department, if confirmed, that we're going to do more on that.
If confirmed, can you give us more information?
Senator Sullivan, your second round time has expired.
My last question, and this is just a quick question, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your
indulgence.
That's the term I was looking for.
Yes, I know.
The Chinese spy balloon incident, as you know, a lot of that took place over Alaska. We've gotten essentially zero information on the aftermath of that. Maybe a lot of it's classified. Can you confirm to brief this committee soon? What are the results of that? What happened? What was it when we shot it down over Alaska? Two of those aircraft shot it down over the Carolina coast. Can you confirm to give us a detailed briefing on all of that? The Pentagon has kind of gone silent, and these are really important issues.
Senator, thanks for raising the question. If confirmed, I will absolutely dig into that and get you the information you need.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your indulgence.
Thank you very much, Senator Sullivan, for your questions. And Mr. Chollet and Ms. Abercrombie, thank you for your testimony. I have two administrative issues. One is I would like to submit for the record a letter signed by 35 senior national security professionals from the past 4 Republican administrations on behalf of Mr. Chollet, including among them is James A. Baker, who is one of the most outstanding civil servants we've ever had in this country. Without objection, so ordered. Now, when I asked you, Mr. Chollet and Ms. Abercrombie, the standard nominee questions at the beginning of this hearing, I inadvertently included a question asked only of military nominees. That question was, quote, do you agree, when asked before this committee, to give your personal views, even if your views differ from the administration? This question and your answer do not apply to your positions, and I ask that the record reflect this fact. And without objection, the record will reflect this fact. Thank you very much. You both demonstrated your capability. I look forward to seeing your confirmation and getting you to lead the Department of Defense. With that, I would recess the hearing and adjourn.